This is the best of literature, number 98, Fathers and Sons. Some background. Fathers and Sons was written by Ivan Turgenev. It was written in Russian, and it was written in 1860-something, I believe. 1860-something. I didn't put it in my notes. I have it in my master notes where I put all the books that I read. I have some notes about them, but I forgot to put it in my podcast notes. So it's 18-something is when it was written. So I looked up some criticism. There's one article that I found that is called Fathers and Sons, a ravishing knockout of a book. So spoiler alert, I think this person liked this one. Quote, my favorite novel is Ivan Turgenev's Fathers and Sons, a 200-page ravishing knockout of a book that explains just about everything you need to know about families, love, heartache, religion, duels, and the institution of serfdom in 19th century Russia. So okay, favorite novel ever for this particular writer. Quote, in the end, Turgenev's gift is his enormous compassion. In Fathers and Sons, no one is right and no one is wrong. Some people are laughable, to be sure, but Turgenev's psychological reach is so great that we never feel derision for anyone. So that's admirable, if that's actually true. So my analysis is rather meager. I don't remember much from this book, honestly. I remember talking about it after reading it. I actually read it. Tiffany and I read it together, so we discussed it at some point. But I couldn't remember much of the particulars of this book, and as of now, I read it a while ago, but some of the characters, Arkady, Bazarov, Anna. I know Bazarov is he's like the nihilist. Arkady and Bazarov both came back from school there at university, and they came back. So you've got the upstart little young adult bastards who think they know everything, but they show back up, and Bazarov's a nihilist, and they're talking about God being dead and that sort of stuff. But I think Bazarov's kind of he's the lightning rod, or he's the cause, the influence on Arkady to become like this. And much of the novel is actually about characters loving characters who don't love them back, and those characters loving other characters who don't love them back. I think there was a nice little, I didn't get that one, but there's a nice little quote from this article that was actually talking about that. But so it's about kind of dealing with family and relating to family in the midst of these progressing intellectual ideas about like nihilism and atheism and that sort of stuff. So my thoughts on it, I was interested in the bigger themes of like nihilism and progress and intellectual progress, and this struggling, kicking and screaming into the modern world. It was 19th century Russian serfdom is what they're coming from. And they go off to a university and transmogrify into kind of the modern human being who's going to think about these bigger ideas, these existential ideas, and be influenced by them and try to talk to their parents about it, but it's two different generations trying to talk about it. And it seemed to me, and I don't know if the author that read the criticism that I read, I don't know if that particular author believed the same thing, but I think that Turgenev was actually pretty sympathetic to the ideas about nihilism and the like, and like atheism. I think, and I could be biased in this, but it seemed like Turgenev was more sympathetic to that idea and was fine in having kind of a tragic hero and ostensibly punished in some way, but in reality has a lot of respect for that area and that honesty, especially given that the book is so apolitical. It doesn't just dive into, one side of it. Oh my gosh, how beautiful is that, especially in nowadays world where everything's got to be, no, it's this message, better have this message. But from what I remember, it was apolitical. It was about the characters and ideas, and I remember Bazarov kind of rejected the ideas related to family and familial obligation and that sort of stuff. But he actually, when he interacted with his family, there was still a tenderness and affection that potentially undermined his ideas about family. But like I said, I think the book was actually much more sympathetic to the ideas of nihilism than it would appear on the surface. And I'd have to read it again, which I probably will at some point. It's pretty short from what I remember, but it seems like it's more sympathetic toward those ideas than you might think. So I've got some quotes, and these are my quotes that I didn't write them, but these are the quotes that I took as I was going through the book and reading it. I tried to pare them down a little bit, but these are the quotes that I ran into. Quote, They came upon little streams, too, with hollow banks, and tiny lakes with narrow dikes, and little villages with low hovels under dark and often tumble-down roofs, and slanting barns with walls woven of brushwood, and gaping doorways beside neglecting threshing floors, and churches, some brick-built with stucco peeling off in patches, others wooden with crosses fallen askew, and overgrown graveyards. I like it a lot. It's beautiful, and it's this descending into 19th century surf villages, and a good description of what it looks like, and how it's built, and how it's put together, and how it progresses as you're going through it. Quote, no, it's not the same thing. A nihilist is a man who does not bow down before any authority, who does not take any principle on faith, whatever reverence that principle may be enshrined in, end quote. So some of the themes, the ideas about nihilism, a nihilist here is represented some kind of an Ubermensch. It's the person who can step beyond that stuff, the principles that their parents and the parents before them and grandparents, great-grandparents, that they live by, that those things aren't taken simply on faith. We don't just have principles that we accept, that we question everything, and we don't bow before any authority. Quote, a good chemist is 20 times as useful as any poet, end quote. And that was Bazarov saying that. So more themes, a good chemist is 20 times as useful as any poet. So of course it's funny. I mean, in this way, you could say that a writer saying that a good chemist is much more useful than a poet. You might say that the writer wouldn't have that particular position, but maybe he does. Quote, I have already explained to you that I don't believe in anything. And what is science? Science in the abstract? There are sciences as there are trades and crafts, but abstract science doesn't exist at all, end quote. So attacking science here. So on the other one, it was lauding a chemist, but here it's attacking science directly. And I can't remember, I didn't write who said that, but anyway. So it's an idea that's floating around in there. Quote, aha, a scalded dog fears cold water. We know that, end quote. So funny way to say that. Yeah. Scalded dog got hit with hot water before. I mean, everybody understands what this means, but got hit with hot water before, and now it's cold, but the dog still afraid of it. I don't remember the context of that. Quote, I begin to agree with my uncle, remarked Arkady. You certainly have a poor opinion of Russians, end quote. So there's this idea of Russianness and Russian culture and what it means to be Russian and et cetera, et cetera. Quote, as though that mattered, the only good point in a Russian is his having the lowest possible opinion of himself. What does matter is that 2 and 2 make 4, and the rest is all foolery, end quote. Quote, the trees in a forest, she repeated. Then according to you, there is no difference between the stupid and the clever person, between the good-natured and the ill-natured, end quote. Some more nihilism stuff. Quote, no, there is a difference, just as between the sick and the healthy, end quote. So not completely nihilist, I guess. Quote, tell me why it is that even when we are enjoying music, for instance, or a fine evening, or a conversation with sympathetic people, it all seems an intimation of some measureless happiness existing apart somewhere rather than actual happiness. Such, I mean, as we ourselves are in possession of. End quote. So it's quite the idea, that the lack of a genuine core to that happiness, there's always some kind of distant thing, no matter what you're experiencing or when you're feeling euphoria or some other degree of happiness, there's some kind of a distance, there's some kind of it's off somewhere as opposed to something central and essential. Last quote, and since you don't quite understand me, I'll tell you this. To my mind, it's better to break stones on the high road than to let a woman have the mastery of even the end of one's little finger, end quote. So, I don't know why I made that the last one, but no, there's a quote. So anyway, that's Fathers and Sons by Ivan Turgenev. So what I recommended, I'd recommend it. It didn't blow my hair back, but it's something that has lingered, especially in looking back into it. It's something that the ideas kind of linger, and it is kind of a transition. It could be a marker transition between the historical person and kind of the modern one. The intellectual development, intellectual maturity of the modern person. So I'd recommend it. And if you enjoyed the writing style, the sound of the quotes or whatever, then it might be worth it to give it a read. Like I said, it's not particularly long. So anyway, that is number 98, Fathers and Sons by Turgenev. And I'm not sure what's coming next, but that'll be in the next one. All right, thanks.